It says we're streaming, so I'm going to go ahead and start. Hi, welcome to the Sisters Interview. My name is Ashaxi. I'm a member of the Order of the Laurel from the Kingdom of Ontir, and this is my sister Serifkin. She is a Knight, Pelican, and Lion of Ontir, and tonight our guest is Duke John the Bearkiller, called the Bastard, Order of the Pelican, Knight. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for agreeing to do this. It's
Sure.
awesome. So we usually start these out with your SCA origin story. How did you find the SCA and what made you fall in love with it?
Okay. I've been in the SCA for a very long time. Before I did the SCA, I was into science fiction cons, did a lot of traveling around. My best friend in the world, Dennis, and I were at a con in Nashville. Now, this is a true story. It's going to sound kind of weird. Summer of 1974, guy comes bursting into our hotel room, and we were maybe a little intoxicated. He said he had a great organization he was starting up in Tennessee, and that it was called the Society for Creative Anachronism, and he was taking money up so he could get as many people to join as possible. So I gave this guy, who's from Knoxville, $3 for 2 memberships, $1.50 each, and we promptly forgot all about it. A little bit late in the summer, I was in my dorm room in college, and my roommate kept getting a phone call from some guy from the Society for Creative Anarchism. And that was true. It's weird. It's weird as hell, but true. So I was like, finally, I found it. And it was a gentleman who went to school at Georgia Tech in Atlanta and was in the group there. And in between quarters, he would come and work, make money, go back to school. But he had somehow gotten my name and Dennis's name, and from there got us interested. Early fall of '74, myself, Dennis, and 5 other people were all members of the University of Memphis Comic Collectors Club. So we just pretty much picked up and moved over to the SCA at that point. Started then, not knowing a single real thing about what we were going to do.
The whole comic collector club.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just about everybody that was in it. It fell apart because everybody went and do something else, and we found out we had probably made a pretty good decision.
I find it so interesting how many of the early people came in through science fiction and comic cons.
Yeah, I had been to, I think, Washington, D.C.'s Worldcon, maybe 72. I'm a little vague on the date, but I saw a couple guys walking around in one of the parties in Chainmail, and with another friend of mine, and we were, well, that looks kind of cool. And I didn't think about it until after I had joined and showed up in an event or two, and both those guys lived in the South. One lived in Texas, in Anstey, a guy by the name of Lloyd Von Acker. And another guy, and they, oh yeah, that was us. Another guy was Starhelm Warlock. Another person, both of them became one became a master, one became a knight. But those were the guys we had seen, and I know we don't remember you at all. We were having fun, but yeah, we cons were it for all of us nerds back then. That's what we did.
And did you have any idea that there was going to be fighting in this group?
It was described to me when the gentleman from Atlanta, we finally got together and met somewhere, and he said, well, there's fighting and you can do this. I was like, oh, that sounds really great. And, he's got my next question is, well, I kind of like girls. I kind of like to drink. And they're like, well, you probably are not going to be too disappointed in this. But when I got in, the first event I went to was Atlanta. And they loaned me everything. I had a big fake fur coat made of some horrible artificial fiber, just a big furry thing. And that was double knit pants and tennis shoes. And I looked like a big just a big goober. And everybody at that event welcomed me and the other comic book converts to the event, loaned us stuff, loaned me gear, loaned me armor, loaned me the first time I ever fought in a tournament. They loaned me everything and treated us very, very nicely, which was cool.
That's cool. So did your fur coat give you your name, your nickname?
No, prior to the SCA, I was always a wrestled in high school, wrestled in early college. Uh, my nickname before Bearkiller was Gorilla. Had a T-shirt with Gorilla. It's all very cute and mildly dumb. But around 1970 or so, a friend of mine came to my parents' house where I was living then. I was 16 or so. Said there was a sports show in Memphis, and that they had a wrestling bear, and if you showed up and threw the bear, you would get $100. So I was the neighborhood wrestling kid, lifted Stingray bikes over my head. It was, again, rather sad at times. But my family, a couple friends, we all went that Sunday to the sports show, and it was near the end of the 4-day sports show. And there was indeed a 6'4", 457-pound brown bear. He had been declawed, had a muzzle, and they would bring him on the stage, and people would wrestle. It was a very nice bear. Drank Kool-Aid in between the bouts. What would usually happen is you'd come onto the ring, you'd put your hand up on the bear's shoulders, and they'd say go. The bear would just take you by the head and throw you out of the ring. The bear wouldn't hurt. Bear, have another bout. He'd sit down, give him a bottle of Kool-Aid. But at the very end, myself and another football player from the University of Memphis had begged our way to be part of it because they were doing like radio personalities and doing it live, and they thought that was all funny. So when I got out there, got on the stage, knew a little bit about wrestling, just enough to be dangerous to myself. And the bear was really cool. So I'm going to tell you, you touch a bear, it's like touching a tree, a rock, a building. It is like, if the bear actually wanted me and wanted to stuff me in between his muzzle, the bear could have done it. But he was kind of nice but solid. And somehow I tripped the bear over my heels. I was taking judo then. There's a little thing called a heel lock. Flipped him over. And there's a series of 6 or 7 Polaroids that my sister did that I show every now and then on Facebook of me at that early age coming up to the bear, ending up on top of the bear in kind of a headlock, which is all really, sounds really cool. But the bear immediately got off the ground and threw me out of the ring. Nicely. It was a nice bear. And so after that, instead of being Gorilla, I was a Bearkiller, which, because of my vast imagination, when I found this wonderful medieval reenactment organization, I promptly chose my real name, John, and my last name is the Bearkiller because imagination was definitely my strong suit. And that's how I got the nickname.
That's the best story.
Yeah. Long time ago, though.
So, how long from that did you really get involved in the SCA? I mean, you must have been kind of a founding member of your area and grew it. And how was that development?
Took all 7 of us about an event and a half. My first event was the one in Atlanta in the fall. Some people went down to, I believe, Baton Rouge to another event that fall. The next event after that was Candlemas in the Mid-Realm. May have not been Candlemas then, but a big Mid-Realm event. And we had never seen anything like that because the Mid-Realm was sophisticated, had real armor, just was awesome. And they too treated us wonderfully, loaned me a great sword. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was poking people, without a thrusting point in the melees. They kindly, instead of tossing me off the field, explained everything, were very gentle with us. And right about then, about the second event, I knew that this was probably something I was going to spend a lot of time in. After that, we got involved. Everybody in the group got involved in doing stuff, setting up a shire. We became a barony pretty soon after that. We had like second generation of us. We started off with 7, then we got another group of people maybe in January of 75, and it just kept kind of growing. But right about there, another year or so, we started doing the principality thing in Atenveld to think about becoming a kingdom. And by then I was, begging knights to be a squire and, take me. somebody write an award recommendation for me. I'd love an AOA. You know, it's really, again, just the biggest goober you could imagine. But I was tolerated and forgiven for my crassness, and that locked it in for me. So moved from there and was turned out to be a half decent student when it came to fighting, and picked that up pretty quick. And it's kind of the Wild West back then, but it was just a good group of people that were very, very welcoming. So that was it. That locked it in. That did it.
And did you end up squiring to somebody?
Yes, I squired to the finest, most gentle, most wonderful, most handsome, most refined, nicest, sweetest knight in the world, a man by the name of Francois Duval. And he was, you've seen Alain Delon in Camelot, right? The French knight in that movie. Francois was better looking than him. He was, and he was so nice, just perfect. And I was just kind of stumbling around, and I think he threw me the belt out of pity. But he would be the perfect, gentle person upon the field, and really good fighter. Taught me a lot. And I would be like, would you help me with my armor? No, I got to fight. And I was really a horrible squire, but he did take me. He taught me how I could probably be a better person in this society. So that was a good relationship with me. And he was probably the top 2 or 3 knights that I have had the honor to know and study under. But that did help me a lot. He never quite got me to get the goober out of a lot of things I did, but he probably helped me stay in by not having everybody chase me out.
Misty, you're muted.
Sorry, my dog was in the room. How far away from you was he? What group?
He lived in Baton Rouge, which from Memphis is about a 7-hour or so trip. And back then, the area of the South that became Meridies, we started off with Aytonville, and then had to go all across Texas, Anstiora, and then the area that was Meridies was just a huge place. And the groups that started, where there was one of the first long-term SCA groups prior to my getting in, was in Trimaris. There was one in Atlanta. I think there was one in New Orleans, and I think maybe one in Baton Rouge. And those were the citadels of the SCA in my part of the country. So we spent a good deal of time traveling 6-8 hours just to get the stuff. But, at that point, it really didn't matter, because, everything you had could fit into a pillowcase or something, including your armor. And, you brought a couple blankets and a pillow, and that was it. And you'd stick 5 or 6 people in a car, and it didn't seem so bad.
Oops. Sorry.
No?
Wow. So it just fascinates me the way that people start groups from nothing, and then it evolves into this. Wow.
Well, the SCA, especially in our part of the country, grew really quick. From around 73 to 74, all the way to about 1980, it just exploded across the southern states down into Florida, which eventually became Trimaris. It was difficult to find a campus then that did not have an SCA group. And most of it was spread through college campuses and sci-fi cons. What we consider demos now was back then, when we didn't have social media, didn't have the internet. You had to do hardwire phones, had to mimeograph stuff. Everything was took a lot of planning, and traveling became part of the experience. But the SCA was a novel idea, and it was certainly different from doing conventions. And most of us had never even heard of a reenactment organization, let alone anything that centered upon, pre-1600s and hitting people with sticks, which was very attractive for me.
Did you have you said something about playing football. Did you have more of an athletic background as well?
Yeah, prior to the SCA, it was in college, I kind of moved from fraternity to fraternity just to be able to play play sports and stuff. So I had done boxing and wrestling and baseball and football, softball, judo, did a brief thing in kendo, did a bunch of stuff. I wasn't particularly good at any one thing, but I did have good reflexes. Anything that caused to do like tennis per se, I'm a little short guy with 8-inch legs. So if I had to move laterally to the side, I was not very successful. But if I could move back and forth, especially with kendo and boxing and things like that, it really helped me move to the SCA. Did some fencing in college too, and all of that pretty much helped me learn how to move with the gear on.
So back when you started, who was the sort of the person that people stylized their fighting on in your area?
We had a knight in Atlanta, Sven, who was the first knight in that area of the country in South Downs. He was a very good fighter. Francois was just excellent. Fast hands, fast feet, very good fighter. We had a relationship as an area with the mid-realm, and a knight by the name of Polydor Haraldson, who was an excellent armor, would visit, good friends with Francois, stay with him. We picked up a lot of stuff from that. But after I was knighted after 2 years and 10 months in, and I was kind of a very fast learner. So like everybody else, we just Sven and Francois, we always heard of the kings and queens and stuff in Atenveld. And up until 77, we'd had a couple visit, but most of us had never even been to Phoenix or Albuquerque, which was the center point of most of Atenveld itself. If we ever saw a crown, it was somebody who drove over from Atenveld to do something special. And there were 2 or 3 of those. And we got to see and learn, which explains, if you think about the way that Meridies and Glenavon is just slightly different from, the East method, the West method, the middle customs and stuff, it's because a lot of this stuff we had to put together on our own from just an occasional visit or maybe a trip out of kingdom. But,
I was going to ask if you were fighting in crowns before you got knighted, but it sounds like no.
Excuse me. No, we were not. The distance was too far to travel to Atenveld to fight in an Atenveld crown. So 77 or so, Meridies was gotten enough interest to. I did travel. Meridies was able to become a principality about then. We only had 3 sets of prince and princesses. We were a principality for about a year and a half. The victor of the first principality list was Francois. So we all got to do that. Atenveld did let us do their warlord tournament once, where you get a shield and a helm you get to carry with you for the length of time that you hold it. The area of Meridies got to do that. I got to win that. But actually traveling and participating, I was not able to do in a crown. I was the second prince of the principality, and a bunch of us got into a convertible and drove to Albuquerque to participate in the crown list, to watch the crown list. We didn't know diddly about being on the throne, really.
Right.
We knew about our principality, we were kind of cool, but we didn't know about administering something that large. So we all went to that. They let me fight in the buys. And it was very interesting. Meridies had a little bit smaller swords, and some of the Atenveld knights called our stuff like tinker toys. It's like, oh, you're going to fight with these tinker toys? You can't possibly hit me. Well, there's a couple of us that were fast enough and determined enough to show them that we could use tinker toys, that fought a lot of buys for them. And then they knighted me at that event. They didn't ask my knight.
Oh.
They didn't ask my knight. I had to drive back as prince back to the principality as a knight without any of the knights in the principality knowing. which made for a difficult 2 years and some interesting, discussions in that. But
That borderlines on cruelty.
in hindsight, I know now I was not ready to be knighted. I was not. I drank a lot, did a lot of dumb things, and I could have done with some really good seasoning, but hey, the Aidenvelt crown, Deaton and Care Cherie at that time were like gods and goddesses to us anyway. They're just beautiful. And so, they tell you to kneel, and do you accept it? If you're, 24 and dumb as a rock, you go, yeah. And then later you have to learn what you did not know and kind of grow up some more. But
I was gonna say, did you and your knight never have a conversation about whether, he should be there? Or?
My knight and I did not talk for about 2 years.
After that.
Oh. And then everything kind of unfroze because I think everybody realized that, we're still friends, and that we just all kind of sat back and kind of blamed the Aidenvelt crown. Well, of course, that's their decision. Nobody could have anything to do with that. And we healed it. And he was a really, really close friend before, even with me being as annoying as possible. Stayed with him a lot. We rekindled that, and he was very forgiving of the situation.
Well, it's a difficult situation for you, though. I mean, the King of Aidenville asked his prince, unbelted prince, whether he's going to accept or not. Of course, you're going to say yes, right? I mean,
yes, that's that has always been my thought.
Right.
But it eventually everything kind of worked out. We were a principality for a year and a half, then we started a kingdom, and by that time everything was doing okay with us.
So tell us about the transition to kingdom and how that happened. And
well, we didn't know much, really. Aidenvelt was very nice to let us do this after a year and a half. So was the society, but we had a lot of interest. We had so much interest that we weren't sure how to exactly administer the crown list without hiccups or bumps. So we had like 2 buy-in tournaments. People had to go to these events and fight for the right to be in the crown list, kind of like tryout tournaments. So we still ended up with a really good field. Well, again, we didn't know a lot about the SCA. We set up a fundraising, as much as we should have. We set up a little fundraising thing where we bet on fighters and put odds out. Found out we probably shouldn't have done that. But we learned. We had a great set of the officers and the people who built it. I was kind of like a side note in a lot of this. We had a lot of very smart, very caring people who did all of the work to get us to that point. And once we got there, and once we had a crown of Aidenvelt come in, a king came in, watched it. That night, he said, well, we are going to, I was fortunate enough to win the first crown list. And the King of Aidenvelt said, well, I'm going to knight you now. And the king, the new kingdom to come said, no, we want to do it later. And the King of Aidenvelt was nice enough to, because he really wanted to do it. He was like first kingdom after the initial 4, but he was nice enough to let us do it a little bit later, and which turned out to not be that great a decision, because I believe it was like in southern Georgia and it was about 12 degrees and it was cold in like January. We should have done it a couple of months earlier, but the transition and that process went very smooth. Aidenvelt was a magnificent parent to us. So we did okay. We did okay. We had a lot of kingdoms, especially the middle. Sometimes Texas, which was soon became a principality after we did, Antiora. We had a lot of people, a lot of friends who spent a lot of time kind of teaching us about what we should do rather than what we, really quickly wanted to do. And it worked out pretty good. worked out really well.
It's so interesting because, you know, we came into the SCA in the mid to late 90s. And so we both kind of jumped in with people that were serving as royalty. So we went right into that whole culture and the rules that were laid out. And I became a seneschal of a barony within the first year of playing.
All
And
right.
so I was like so hooked into the rules and hearing you talk about just doing it, and it just, oh my God.
Well, I guess we can't ignore the fact that we made a lot of mistakes. We really did. We you know, turns out inventing the wheel sometimes takes 700 or 800 steps.
Yeah.
But again, we're a very forgiving organization sometimes when it comes to folks who really want to learn. And it's been fun. I've enjoyed 95% of it.
That's amazing.
So when Meridies went kingdom, did Texas go with it? Was Texas
No.
part of it? No.
No, Meridies became a principality. I'm not sure when Antiora it was fairly soon after that, but I know Meridies became a thing in my thing. I know Antiora fairly quickly did that too. Trimaris, which was part of Meridies, Antiora stayed part of Atenvelt. Meridies split off. Florida was part of it. Fairly within a few years, Florida became their own kingdom. Actually, I've added it up a couple times. I'm not going to be exact here, but Atenvelt spawned like 8-9 kingdoms. Just an incredible process. But they took up a good bit of the country back then, and the Outlands, just a bunch of kingdoms. But yeah, Antiora, we were always close. They were part of the original group that when Meridies worked to get Gulf War started with Trimaris and Meridies and Antiora, and there's always been a good working relationship. I live on the west side, or lived on the west side of Meridies. Tennessee is now, I guess, kind of the east side of Glenavon, but we were always closer to Texas, and it's always and Oklahoma. That kingdom's always been pretty close, and we kind of helped each other. We learned from each other what to do, and we learned from each other what not to do, which can be just as important sometimes.
So you said that you won the first Meridies crown, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about developing awards and shaping culture.
Well, wow. That again, we had a lot of people who were involved in coming up with all of this stuff. I worked on the first set of laws, but the award system was built pretty much as a committee. What do we want to do? We want to have some grant level awards. We had 3 or 4 of those starting off. Then we had some AOA. Maybe the first set of awards were maybe like 6 or 7. But that again was built on what we had heard and learned from watching our more mature forebears. But that's Meridies still has, after 40 some odd years, I think, over 40 years, 40, 41, 42 years, still bear the basic set of awards. Now, they, like every other kingdom, has dozens of other awards, and they've redone, dropped the grant, added the grant, done a bunch of changes and stuff. But it was a good foundation. And a lot of Glenavon's awards, though they won't say it because, I tell you, we're splitting off, we're our own people. Woo. A lot of that is built on what they learned as being part of Meridies. So we had a good foundation in that.
Awesome. Somebody's asking, what does it mean to be a Laurel kingdom?
A Laurel kingdom.
In quotes.
I always thought it was one of the earlier kingdoms, but I'm sure that's more of a heraldic, kind of question. And I'm
I don't know the answer either.
I don't know the answer.
I don't know.
I just thought it was an SAAism, like you're a Laurel.
I think it
kingdom
is,
if you're
yes.
official. You got the laurel wreath on your
You got
thing.
you got the laurel wreath. That's it. Thank you. We've worked that out perfectly. Thank
I'm
you.
just making stuff up here.
That's good. That
Answer.
sounds logical to me. That's it.
So, as the first king of Meridies, were there any interkingdom wars that you guys did, or did you start any?
Yeah, border raids was started during Francois's time as the first prince. Francois and Anne were our first prince and princess, and Cassandra was the first queen of Meridies, by the way. But I think in his first reign, he talked to some people in the middle. They came down. We had an event at a little kind of like an amusement park outside of Memphis, and we had a war with the North versus the South, original. But then that was the 70s. That was our war. That has lasted until now. It is after Penzic. I'm pretty sure it's still going on. I know it's had some rough spots now and then, but it's the second longest continuing war in the SAA's border raids, and that was during Francois and Anne's reign. I was the autocrat, and what I did was present a feast of canned peaches, chopped ham, a couple of kegs of beer, and some cheese and bread, because that was the level of expertise I had then. And it was hot. Yeah. I still hear about that every now and then. The people that, oh, and canned peas too. That was a big hit. But it was a lot of fun. It was hot, but it was a lot of fun, and then took off. But yeah, that's for Meridies is through Glenavon, I would say border raids and Gulf Wars, which started 92, 93, 94, right around there. So those are the two big things. We participate with Border March melees with Aunt Stiora has kind of, show up because it's a great event. But those two are the our main ones from our area.
Cool.
So during your journey, when did you start to take on students of your own?
See, I was kind of hoping you wouldn't bring that question in. So when I became a knight, my wife is laughing in the background. Watching her and over. So up until that time in the area known then as Meridies, most knights had like one student. And myself and another squire were very arrogant in our belief that we were the most wonderful thing in the SCA ever. So when I got knighted, and this probably explains why Francois didn't talk to me for two years. I came back from being knighted, went to my first, the first event after coming back, and squired 4 people from my barony. Yeah, it's funny, but it turned out to be a little not quite as funny. But I've had a number of students. Our line running through Francois, I've had 15 squires knighted myself. Our line through multiple kingdoms, there are just we get, we spread out from the squire to a knight, squire to knight, squire to knight. 6 or 7 maybe generations down. Just a lot of folks. It wasn't that I was never a great teacher. I was, pretty much said when you became a squire, I'll teach you some stuff, but it's your job to become a peer. I can't make you a peer. And what I meant by that is you're going to have to do all the work. And so I've always been lucky in having the chance to have some very good people study with me. And so been very successful. I was a lot more careful. Got my Pelican after being in the SCA maybe 18, 19 years, because they actually had to think about me a lot. I was a lot more careful with my proteges than I were with my squires. I was always rather rambunctious because most of my activity in the SCA was focused then. For the first 18 years or so was fighting. So, but when I became a Pelican, I took one, maybe two, and then let them process and go their own route, their own road, and little hands off, but watch them and give them as much help as I can. Again, the object is to learn how to build things yourself. And I believe very firmly, and Francois always believed in that. So that's kind of been our, learn the rules, study, work with your peer, work with other people, gather information from as many sources as possible, because that kind of works. We've never been good, especially in our area for whatever reason, in being kind of cookie cutter, we don't do that. Our systems are a little focused on what each of our strengths are, and that could be good and that could be not so good, but it's worked out well.
That is cool. So your Pelican, is that for autocrating and rating and
my original area of work was fundraising. Early 80s, I took an interest in getting people up and getting them to places. So raised late 70s, early 80s, raised about $3,500 then to get a bus to go to Penzix. So we were able to fundraise the whole bus, get 35 or so people into a rented Greyhound bus with a driver, took us to Penzix. It was a little dicey getting on site because the buses are bigger than I think anyone had expected that time for the original Penzix site, and Cooper's Lake. And then the next year did about the same thing, did that 2-3 times, raised money for the kingdom a lot, did a lot of auctions. And then mid 80s, I started writing ceremonies, peer ceremonies, coronations, investitures for a lot of people. And that's kind of what I centered on for my service. Was Seneschal of the Bearneck a couple times. That's pretty much what I got my Pelican in then. And then, early mid 90s, my whole SCA life altered greatly. And I kind of moved away from fundraising and to other stuff.
What precipitated that?
Well, there's a woman by the name of Elfred of Duckford, very nice woman in the Outlands. She did a thing called Think Well, which was she would have people write in, send her stuff. She would edit it and send it out as a news magazine. And it was about different subjects that people would write. And I said, well, I got to do this. So I wrote and got some word fame from some of the stuff that came out in her very excellent newsletter. And then 93 or so, late 92, the board hired Tony Provine as the executive director of the society. And around about that time, the entire SCA kind of went to pieces. They had hired an outside person to run the SCA, but the outside person to run the SCA, because we wanted to be a little more professional, didn't know anything about the SCA. So the first thing that was done was tell everybody that the SCA had to go to pay to play. Everybody had to be a member to participate, which was not received well in many areas of the country. Big brouhaha, a couple board meetings, I understand, were picketed in California, because of the tyranny that was being done. And Tony Provine was not a very honest person about our finances. The membership was told it was an emergency. Really wasn't an emergency. It was, we need a lot of money to modernize, but we're going to tell everybody the reason is an emergency, which it's a self-created emergency. So at that time, after doing Think Well, 3 people on the board resigned at once because of the furor, the noise of what was going on. And I was one of the people asked to come on because somebody said, well, hey, he writes for Think Well. He seems to have a brain. So my first board meeting was like April of 93. And I got off the plane, showed up in shorts, T-shirts, and a baseball cap. Went to my first board meeting as a member and proceeded to not know much about anything other than I could tell stuff was screwed up. So turns out in some odd, bizarre way, I am kind of trustworthy, and I'm pretty much a fast learner on what our rules say and what maybe they should say. And turns out I had the folks I work with on the board like my work. But so I've been on the board 4 times in the last. I did it like in the 90s, early 2000. I retired and kind of dropped a little bit out for about a 4-year period from 2001 to 2005. Got back in a little bit after that, became seneschal again. But I've been on the board 4 times. Like, oh my God, you must be the terror czar of the world. But that's not what I've done. Is, board term is 3.5 years. I am the SCA spackle. If somebody quits or some bad thing happens, I get, and you don't get the full term. You only fill out the term. So it's like, I've been on the board. Yeah, so I've probably been on the board like maybe a total of about 6 weeks. It sounds, it's each of the terms were for like a year and a half. But we managed, with the help of Ants Diora, in the mid 90s when we had this thing, people were seriously talking about breaking the SCA up. There was a lot of distrust. There's always been a lot of distrust about the board because some of the nature of the way they do things. But this was really bad. And they had collectively, because of this Provine individual and his weaselly lawyer named Seeley, who he got on, there was a lawsuit. It was a total mess. Took about 3-4 months. We got rid of him, got rid of his lawyer, and then we had to rebuild. And part of the rebuilding was working with Ants Dior and others who had threatened to incorporate and just quit, just start their own stuff. So through a good amount of negotiation and discussion, which discussion and talks are always good to help clear out stuff, we managed to convince everybody that this particular thing was a mistake. It was a mistake by the corporation. And we are more than willing to drop all the stuff about pay to play. But there are some things who came out of that. The Grand Council, which was around for like 15 or 20 years. King's put members on it to advise the board. The non-member surcharge came out of that. It's called something else now. I'm going to get yelled at for not using the correct term. Member discount or something. When it was started, the kingdoms split that with the corporation. Everybody seemed to like that. That way we could kind of like touch base for the expenses of folks who weren't members and as opposed to people who were. And but that's what got me off of my playing locally. So I did that, was on the board once, was Society Seneschal. Then at the time, the board, usually the chairman and the president were the same person. All the board held the 3 corporate officers, treasurer, secretary, and the president. The board put me in for 6 months to test. This was, again, 90s, to test putting the president's office off the board to handle other things. So I was the first president off that. And I did that for, I don't know, 6, maybe 8 years. And then took a long break till 2012 or 13 when, again, there was somebody had a very bad thing happen in their life and they needed somebody to step up and fill this slot. Let's say step up. And I was asked to do that. Then I got asked to do it again after somebody else had to quit. And leading up to 3 years or so ago when they asked me to be the president, which is basically just the spokesman and handling legal stuff. But that got me off my fundraising because I haven't been able to touch money in the SCA in a long time. It's a good decision.
How do you balance all your work at corporate with still having a good time at events and stuff?
It is difficult at times. We are the SCA. We are part of the fabric of a good bit of the world. We go through the same problems that the world has. So, and every now and then, we had the lawsuit, the Schrager lawsuit, that took a number of years that got it makes it tough sometimes. And it is because you have to handle a business side of stuff. Coming into an event or stuff is like a breath of fresh air. There's stuff you got to do. It's like being on a throne or being a kingdom officer or a local officer during times when times are tough. You got a hard job to do. You got a tough event to pull off, tough feast. It can be hard working and it can affect your enjoyment, but getting away and seeing people and being able to talk and stuff is very nice. It's just helps me immensely.
So you're able to turn off that corporate part and have fun.
Okay, you probably won't hear my wife laugh at that. I carry sometimes I'm a brooder, so I carry a lot of stuff with me. And then sometimes it is difficult. Sometimes it is difficult. Sometimes when things are good, it can be done. Again, we've got good folks working everywhere in the SCA, and normally there's not a lot of stuff that I really have to do other than maybe look at officers every now and then at corporate level and tell them to get their report on time as I, send mine in a day late. But normally it's not bad. This recent time is very difficult.
Yeah.
And it is difficult on every single person in the SCA. It's difficult on every single person not in the SCA. So, but normally it's okay. Got a lot of friends, got a lot of people who make fun of me when I need to be made fun of, and kid me, and everybody lets me know that my poop still stinks, and that I've always had a really good group around Memphis. They've known me forever, so they know all of my foibles. They know everything, so they don't let me forget that the SCA is what it is basically at its heart is something to enjoy and maybe learn something. So that helps too.
Yeah, those people in your life that can make you laugh no matter what are priceless.
Yes. Yes, they are.
So I noticed that you had an award for being a poet. Did your poetry arise out of your peerage ceremony writing, or what's the poetry about?
I do poetry and bardic stuff. I've got Kingdom Bardic Awards or Poetry Awards from Glenavon, and Bardic and Poetry Awards from Meridies. I started scrawling stuff during the 70s. It wasn't very good. And then I kind of switched from I switched my work to SCA Life. There is authentic poetry, researched songs, the manner in which folks performed or had their instruments or do everything. And then there's SCA Life, which is based on the SCA itself. I'm pretty good at that. Started doing some filk stuff. I did a coronation. So I was never actually fully embraced with my sense of humor at times. I did a coronation ceremony 20 years ago based on the Wizard of Oz's, Meridies. And, part of it was, we represent the Meridian Peers. And that didn't go over well.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah. It was, had the king and queen singing songs from the Wizard of Oz. So that's, you kind of, you can kind of get, I guess, an idea of where my sweet spot is when it comes to doing A&S. But I do know ceremony. I do know kind of the way things need to be said, whether it's in Meridies or Glenavon. So the ceremonies and the poetry and the bardic stuff, did a lot of filking, wrote the SCA horror show based on the Rocky Horror Picture Show that was performed at Gulfports a couple times, a good bit ago. Available on DVD. No, it's not.
I'm like, really? If we had known, we would have played it here and talked about it.
But if Disney could do a good song, by God, I can filk it about cooking or war control or something like that. So
someone says that you rap too.
I have rapped. I do a mean version of Period As You Wanna Be. which is based on a group called Two Live Jews, which are the greatest guys in the world who did a song called Kosher as You Want to Be. I wrote for Period as You Want to Be. Every 3-4 years, I do this. They're a great group. I am not. But yeah, I will do rap every now and then. You don't really want to see it.
We won't ask you to sing. It's okay.
Thank you. Oh, God bless you. Much appreciated.
So do you still fight with all of this?
No, the last few years in 2001, 2002, I tore my left bicep tendon.
Ouch.
Went to 2 different orthopedic doctors who both said, you're an older guy, you can get by with what you got. Thus, my insurance company did not do it. So I had to give up my beloved Wankel shield, which is like one of the only 4 in the existence in the SCA. And I had to go to a heater shield. I had to do that. And then, like I said, in the early 2000s, I kind of got a little bit out of the SCA. I'd reached a point of not being a good place then. And I up until about 3-4 years ago, I'd show up every once or twice a year and fight spear. Love polearm, love spear. But now, not so much. It is the hardest thing in the world to go to a Crown list and watch these young pukes fight. It is hard. It is the hardest thing in the world. But it is what life does to all of us. And I have huge respect for folks who fight into their 60s and some in their 70s and some who overcome great physical issues in doing this. That's good. I just don't do it anymore.
Yeah,
and I miss it.
My husband has such an addiction to fighting that he can't go to an event and not fight. It's like painful. So that's why I asked, because I know that's hard.
It is. The first 30 years, it was my life. Up until the early 2000s, the 28 years, I just fought all the time. I fought, practiced 2-3 times a week, did it all, loved it. Fought in 6 Crown lists, won all 6, never went to the losers bracket. And then fortunately for me, I kind of got a little bit out of it when fighting really started to get a little more sophisticated. Yeah, it was fighting in the SCA has been very good to me. It's given me a whole lot of what I had. I am one of the luckiest people in the world because, I mean, you get to be a Crown, you get to do all this stuff based on fighting. So while I miss it horribly, it was extremely, I consider it one of the coolest and most joyous times, but I got a lot of stuff out of it. So it's fun to watch current fighting because it is so sophisticated and so advanced. I just love it.
Were all 6 of your reigns in Meridies?
Well, there's another story to that too. Yes.
Okay. I love the stories. Keep those stories coming.
Oh no, this is, like I said, my early times, most folks who have known me for a long time know the Bearkiller from the original Bearkiller. And then they know the Bearkiller from when I married my wife, Jane Fallada, Mistress Jane. In 93, there was a complete change of a person because it altered me greatly. So, but during my fighting times, won a Crown list in the 70s, won a few in the 80s, won one in the 90s. I fought for somebody once, one of the finest women I know in the SCA, and fought for her. And there was a problem with my first wife we had permission to do this, and it went horribly wrong. And one of those 6 Crown lists, I had to step down before I stepped up. And it is just about my greatest shame in the society that I did that, because the woman that I had fought for would have been a freaking awesome ruler, would have, just been an awesome queen, just so much. And we're good friends today, but yeah, I have that on me too. So
everyone has regrets.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that, either but you mentioned really, really loving fighting. It's like I got in a Crown list and that was, everything disappeared. I would eat my Snickers bar and my quart of orange juice and then be raging the entire time as squires would come up and get away from me, get away from me. So I could have probably not done that, and I probably, in hindsight, I shouldn't have. But yeah, it's been good to me, and I've made a couple of mistakes with it too.
After you got remarried, I mean, you have kids now, right? You have
I have a son.
you have a son. Does he play SCA?
Oh hell no. He Daniel's the coolest kid in the world. Third degree, went through schools, a third degree black belt in Taekwondo. Just a great kid, talented, brilliant. Grew up in the SCA. Grew up like going up to people and say, "Johnny Bearkiller is my father. Give me $1." Right. But that was when he was like 5 or 6. Are you going to eat that? Johnny Bearkiller is my father. So, but when he got to a point where he actually was able to see the SCA, he's like, "No, this is not for me. It's what my parents do. It is what my dad does. My mom does. My mom does. They both do that." He moved on to other things. So tall, much taller than me, good chest, excellent legs, had a good physical build, taller than me. I'm a short little guy. I'd have loved to have been over 6 feet tall, but he decided.
My 16-year-old son is 6'5" and growing.
See, that's never underestimate height. It is such a gift. It is such a gift.
And he's not interested in fighting.
He has no interest in fighting. He's a total D&D geek, so he may.
Oh, that is what my son does. That is exactly what he does. He's 27 now, and lives with his wife out in another town, and does a really good job, and is a D&D geek, just like his old man.
That's great.
His mom is horrified by all of that, but just like times the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
I have the same experience because my husband and my son go off and they play their games, and I'm like, okay, this is fun.
It's like a foreign language. I'm just like, ooh.
Yeah. My wife is like that. She does arts and sciences in the SCA, and she too is a pelican and autocrat and stuff. So she keeps herself busy with useful things.
That's what I always say. I'm the only one doing anything useful in the house.
That's it.
I think she's our people.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's awesome.
Somebody says, did you write an adventure?
Did I write an adventure?
Yeah.
Not sure what that means.
I don't know. Did you write some adventure story or an adventure movie?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. A friend of mine and I are currently authors of 2 of the worst books on Amazon. We are finishing the 3rd book now, which we've gotten better. The 2nd book is much better than the first one. The Blood and the Blade series. The 1st book takes about 30 minutes to read. We do 16th century Venice, recreation of Venice and the Vatican and the political stuff there, along with blood magic and fighting. I do all the fighting scenes. He writes all the non-fighting scenes. And we have 2 books so far. The 3rd book, that God help them, multiple people are waiting to read. I do not know why. Should be out, and we will finish the trilogy and then move on to something else. But yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, I do. I am a writer. I'm a writer. Some people like it.
Somebody else is asking, do you still worship goats?
So some people know some stuff that they really shouldn't know.
Remember, you can pass.
A bunch of us were out in the middle of the woods in, Middle Tennessee or so, and we went to go do a run to the Quick Mart, get some gas. We stopped in the middle of nowhere. Again, a true story. Stopped in the middle of nowhere. 4 of us got out of the car and marched in our SCA outfits to buy stuff. The other guy, a squire named Timmis, was pumping gas, and again, true story, a couple of carloads of square dancers came up to get gas, and they all piled out, and they were looking at us in the store and looking at Timus. And one of the square dancers came up and said, "Hey, that's a nice outfit. What do you do?" And Timus said, "Well, we worship goats." And I swear to goodness, within 5 minutes, 2 highway patrol cars were there to watch us leave the mini mart and go back to the state park, where I'm sure they watched to see if there was any bonfires and any, naked goat dancing or anything like that.
That is hilarious.
Yeah, it wasn't quite as hilarious at the time, but
well, no, I'm sure
it makes it, like most things in the SCA, it makes a better story than it does the actual facts. But that's kind of true. Timus was kind of odd. So that's the goat story. That's why the goat story.
Excellent.
You really need to tell me who's asking these questions so I can remember who they are. I think that would be wonderful. I have a long memory now,
so that was from Moira. She's the current Baroness of Stromgard.
Oh, well,
Moira and Duncan.
Okay. I don't know how they found out about the goat story, but they may be thinking of another goat story, but that's the last.
That was a good one. So
that's the last goat story I remember.
So we kind of skipped over your reigns. Like, what is your favorite part of reigning? Why did you do it multiple times?
Well, I really love fighting, and I am kind of a ham, so I enjoyed it. It is the best. Anybody who's, it's such a hard job. I can't believe it. I'm going to fight in my 14th, crown list. It'll be my 10th reign, but it's really hard. No, it's a great job. It is a great, very rewarding job. There are times when it's not, but it was enjoyable. I loved interacting with people. I loved the ability to give awards and recognize folks. So I did it for the first 5 times because I was a greedy little sucker. I did it for the last time for Falada, who let me do it once because she has her own thoughts on the crown because she's always been an autocrat, always been the one who cleans up under the sinks and fixes the plumbing and cooks the feast. So I begged her for 2 years. She said once. She did it once. She was a great and wonderful queen, and then she said that's it. And the last time I enjoyed, the first time was good. There were other. It's just such an opportunity, and I was, like I said, very blessed to have good hands and good footwork, and be able to hit people with sticks to do such a great job.
Super fun.
Yes, it is.
No?
We have a question?
I don't know. What is your favorite tradition in your kingdom? What is your favorite thing that your kingdom does that other kingdoms don't necessarily do?
Well, my favorite, and I'm pretty sure it's my wife Falada's, Leslie's favorite, is in the end of the second reign of Meridies, the then King Orlando came in on a palanquin. He was a professional actor, was an actor, came in made up as an old man on his palanquin, and the crown prince, who was me, challenged him to a duel in which, within about a foot of everything on the front row, we went through an unrehearsed sword fight with live steel, in which the much better live steel theatrical fighter almost beat me to death. It culminating in me killing him, the blood pack, and then that started the whole Meridian tradition of offing their crowns. I really like that. I never quite grasped the whole, you have supreme power for 6 months and you're just going to give it up to these upstarts. Nah, make it a bloody death, give the people a show for their sight fee. And I've always liked that. it's different. It's odd. I've been personally mauled to death by a dancing bear, been killed by cutthroats and assassins, and had people come down and take people off to ferry, and just all kinds of horrible bloody. I brought a queen's hand in once. Lawrence and Anna she died off stage, and they brought her bloody hand in on a golden platter. And then the crown prince or princess come in and takes over. It's always, my personal thought, I know it's my wife's thought, you pay your money, you get a show. But that is really not accepted as cool in a lot of places. But that tradition I like.
I think it's really great too, because psychologically it kind of allows you to switch gears.
Yes.
It's for both the reigning couple and for the crowd. It's like, okay, this is over. This is the end. It's dead. And here's the new beginning. I love it.
There is a fatal flaw in this, in that from Meridies for 30 or so years, 30 plus years, and Glenavon, 10 plus years, had a lot of crowns get murdered. And the knights have sat by the whole time. It doesn't, we've never been able to explain that part. It's just like, oh my God, we've screwed it up again. So that's kind of a logical thing that we've never really come to grips with. But sometimes crowns step away for regular reasons. But we've had some pretty good bloody ones over the years. Pretty good.
Super fun.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel that peerage has evolved over the years?
I think the talents involved, service, rapier, combat, the arts and sciences have all grown immensely. Nothing like access to most of the knowledge in the world, and to make it simply incredible. We've got all this stuff. The social aspect of all of that, sometimes it gets a little hard, a little crusty around the edges, because sometimes tradition is sometimes more important than what works. So most of the time, the peerage seems to me to have evolved pretty good. Each of the kingdoms has their own way of doing it. Each of the kingdoms have the way of producing advice and consultation to the crown. They do it in their own manner. Each kingdom is universally different, and the performance of the orders in terms of what they're supposed to do seems to be pretty solid. There are bumps, there are problems, and sometimes we let things go as orders that we should address a little quicker. Communication problems, personal issues, and there are other problems sometimes. But overall, I think it's okay. It does take longer to be a peer than when I was. I'm an example of when you grew up in the Wild West, how quick did it take to do stuff? But it normally, I would say that everything is matured with the skills and the arts and the talents to be a pretty good system. Nothing wrong with shaking things up every now and then and making everybody rethink what they think works or reflect well on what your actions are. But can always improve, but I think it's still a good system. I like the system.
It's interesting to me how different, and I'm a Laurel, and so I can only speak to the way the Laurel's Council works, and I know that in some kingdoms the Laurels don't really take notes on candidates, and the crown just kind of does it. And in our kingdom, we have databases.
Yeah.
And we're split off into 7 sections, and we all kind of monitor our own candidates and our own thing. And it's a huge undertaking to keep track of all that. And it's mind-boggling, and it fascinates me that everybody's so different.
They are their own traditions, their own laws. Just pretty much every place is a totally new culture. I'm fascinated by it. I was always lucky to know that each kingdom was different, and that there's, the way you play in one area of the SCA, you go next door and it's entirely different experience. Most folks think that their kingdom is the cat's meow, and that where we do it best. But it's hard to, from my personal opinion, it's hard to define which is best. It's only finding which way works best for each area.
Yeah.
And the difference in kingdoms and cultures is quite stunning and amazing. It's fascinating. I like that part. But on the other hand, now I got to stare at the rules all the time.
Right.
So it takes me away from learning kingdom cultures and focusing on rules and stuff. But that's okay too.
What's your favorite out of kingdom tradition?
Fighting wise, I like what Candlemas does in the mid realm. Just a huge fighting thing. I would really like to go to Sport of Kings in Ontario, because
We would love it if you came up for that.
We've had a couple people here from Memphis go, and they're just freaking amazed and want to go back. I think my favorite culture kind of thing, and it's kind of a love-hate relationship, is Pennsic. The way they do things, the way they've set that up over 49 years or so, is just amazing, and I am impressed. And I've wrestled, when I was Society Seneschal, I wrestled with them and following our rules and blah, blah, blah. But they do a really good job at what they do, and it has progressively gotten better. So I guess that tradition, in terms of how other places can run something so intricate, is pretty good. I like that. That's the Pelican in me.
Before I started doing these interviews, I had no idea the planning and the behind the scenes negotiation between the kingdoms that went into that from the East and the Mid Realms perspective.
Yes,
it's a little crazy.
Yes, and they are, and it is a dead serious thing, and they take their responsibility to heart. And on the other hand, it's, if you've got to pick an event to go to at least once, Pennsic is that, because it's 10, 12,000 person town. It's not for some people. They have a lot of folks that are not in the SA to come and visit, but it's worth seeing.
For sure.
A little something for everyone there.
Yes, it is.
So we have a couple other questions from the audience.
Okay.
And again, you can always say, I'm going to pass.
All right.
How do you see the SCA changing, and what are some of the things you would like to see happen?
I would like to see the SCA make itself, in the future, give itself a good chance to survive and be something that could be enjoyed and useful to as many people as possible. We're going through a lot of changes. Society is going through a lot of changes. The world is going through a lot of changes. The concept, we are having philosophical discussions on all levels inside the SCA now on what we want the SCA to be. My personal thoughts are, I would like us to change to fit what is needed to be a good organization. We have a lot of stuff that we say in our rules, especially in Kapora, be chivalrous. Everyone is expected to have some semblance of polite. And I would like us to be welcoming to everybody in the future. And at the same time, offer something for as many folks who are interested in history, pre-1601, back as possible. We are going to change. We are changing. The Corona issue has made some immediate changes in everything for us. So we have to wait to see what we will come out with after this is hopefully handled and gone. But I think we need to continue to. We're not the SCA of the 1980s. We're not the SCA of the 1990s. We're not the SCA of the beginning of the
The aughts.
21st century. We are the SCA. We are the SCA in the 2020. So what's our best way to make us viable, both for our members and participants, and to continue to be a successful not-for-profit? Because I would like to think that we are around in a few years, so that maybe some goober who walks in who's only interested in maybe one particular thing can be welcomed and learn that there's a whole lot of good people here, and something worth doing. I want us to be something that is good for people to like to do. And sometimes that's difficult to discuss or explain or come to grips with, but that's what I'd like.
I would love if people are a little kinder online, because it gives a bad first impression sometimes when people get so passionate they forget their kindness.
Yes, most definitely. And everything is online now. We've stopped going to events. We've stopped, heck, even going to meetings or practices or arts practices or dance, anything. And now everything is centered around us as individuals. There's no real physical interaction. So that makes what goes on in social media a little harder edge. And I agree 100%. It's I wish everyone were a little kinder, cut everybody a little more slack. But sometimes it's hard to do. And sometimes my definition of slack is not the proper definition of slack.
Allow people the opportunities to learn and grow.
Yes. Yes. And give everybody a chance to accept that what we want things to be may not be the way we have to do things to have an organization. And yes, give people a chance to get used to stuff. We're so quick to jump on all levels that maybe we need to just rethink. Sometimes it takes a little more time for people to get used to change. Be good.
Yeah.
And I get that that's really hard for some people because they've been marginalized and they've been dealing with this their whole lives.
Yes.
And to come up against people who are just now going, oh,
yeah,
and the huge learning curve that's ahead of a lot of people is really hard to have patience with.
Yes.
That's totally valid.
Yes, it is. It is totally valid. And some things like, finding out that women had not been treated as well as they could have been by part of our culture and the society for decades, and having to address and work on that and hopefully make everybody know what is expected to be in the SCA towards treatment of people should be something we can treat everybody like. And getting to that point, I think we can do. Maybe uncomfortable, but I think we can get there. But yeah, we don't. I don't understand why opening our arms wider as an organization is a difficult thing to grasp. I really do not. If because there are a lot of us who were given a lot of chances, and I'd like to think we would do that for anybody.
And change is scary.
Well,
it is.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that the fun has to go away, right?
No.
You can open your arms bigger and still have fun.
Yes. Yes.
So anyway.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to change the pace a little bit. I have another question.
Okay.
What would you say to someone who is thinking about taking on an officer position for the first time? What advice would you give about moving to more of the business side of our game?
Spend a little time knowing what the job actually does before, if you can. Sometimes things happen and you get thrust in it, but learn as much as you can. Be patient with yourself as much as everybody else, because there's going to be a learning curve at just about any type of job we do in the SCA. But usually it is a a good thing, and understand that it is needed and that you should be treasured for trying to do a good job. And a lot of people, they may not say that, but there's a lot of folks who always say, even silently, thank you for doing it. It is appreciated, but be patient and learn. And some of those jobs are very tough. There are some jobs I cannot do in the SCA. I cannot do the exchequer's job. I would be the most horrible exchequer in the world.
Me too.
No way.
I could not do it. I could not do it. Not a particularly good herald. I could yell, but that's about it. But find a job that you would like to do. Find a job you think would be a challenge, maybe a little, and find a job that you can learn something, and that makes it all a little better. And hopefully you work with a bunch of good people so that you don't get too much flack from anybody. It's worth it.
It is, and it's what keeps the society going. If people don't take up those mantles and do those jobs and become passionate about serving in some aspect, everything will fall apart. So it's super important.
And there's every event, so many people put in the time. Talk about what officers or crowns or positions or peers. Alongside of all of that are just literally 10,000 folks running stuff so that we have things. So we never forget that wherever you look in the SA, there's somebody probably doing something for somebody or for a good reason because it needs to be done. So I mentioned slack earlier. Cut everybody a little slack. Try not to take what you do to be more important than what other people do, because I'll be honest with you. A good crown is great. Woo, good crowns. But let me tell you, if you can sit troll for 14 hours for 3 days straight, I would be hard pressed to see which one was more useful to the SCA at that particular time. So thank you to everybody who works or volunteers to take an office for the first time. I did, and they didn't kick me out of it, so I must have learned something.
What would be even better is if more of us volunteered so nobody had to sit 14 hours at gate.
Yes. Yeah, everybody's load, everything we carry is a little lighter. The more folks put in. It's like doing the nasty Cradden event where you maybe drive the golf cart. Maybe you'd get a little bit more enjoyment for the people who work hard if a couple more people would volunteer. Yeah, any help at all makes everybody's load a little easier. Gives everybody a little more free time to enjoy what the SCA can be. Yes, volunteers are good.
And somebody says thank you for all your work.
Oh, thank you.
Someone says you're the fastest beer chugger ever, but I don't believe it because we've never chugged against.
Okay. Again, in my early years, in fact, that is my mug I brought for this. Is the Tavern Brawl 1990 Tavern Champion. In my earlier years, I went to Pennsic, went to multiple events, had crewing or chugging teams. At one time, I was a phenomenon. It's not the greatest talent to have, but we used to sit down, pour 4 beers, chug them, teams of 4. It was, again, little knowing what the effects of alcohol would have on us as we got older, of course. But yeah, I'm still, even at my age, and even though I don't really drink much, I came out of retirement a couple years ago at Gulf Wars and challenged a couple people, chugged a really fast beer, had a bunch of kids around me, kids, 20s, 30. And they was like, holy shit. And, I'm sorry.
That's okay. We cuss here. It's all good.
Okay, good. That's amazing. How can you do this? Like, well, that's it. They go, do it again. It's like, nope. Did it once. Came out of retirement. It was amazing. Probably twice would probably just make me keel over. But yeah, I at one time I was a pretty powerful arm wrestler and beer chugger, 2 of the more useful talents in the world.
Sir Rifkin is quite the beer chugger herself.
I'm out of practice. But in my 20s, I probably could have gave you a run for your money.
I respect talent. Good for you. Thank you. It's nice to meet another professional. Thank you.
So the movie The Magic Necklace has been mentioned like 5 times.
Yeah.
So I'm finally gonna bite, and again, you can skip it.
I'll just do it briefly, right?
Okay.
In the 70s, when we owned like an 8mm camera, I wrote a 15-20 minute mini, I call it movie, called The Magic Necklace, about an evil magician and the good guys looking for parts to a necklace to trying to stop the evil magician from getting in and taking power and controlling the world. So get everybody in our barony, everybody in our barony to be part of it. We filmed it. We had people turned into stuffed animals, stop the camera, replace it with a stuffed animal, and do stop action to move it across the thing. It's like 15 minutes of nonsense. We all looked to be in our 20s. But the thing about the Magic Necklace is it did not age well. We used terms that were horribly offensive now, and we can't show it again, because at the time, we were Greenish was our first Laurel was a black lady, Sumara. Our third Seneschal was one of the highest paid drag queens in Memphis. We were always a little pocket of oddness in which we were truly a culture unto ourselves. So we were never selective of anybody would play. So we thought everything was funny, and that 8mm film that is on VHS tape that will never show again. Somebody asked me about it last week. I go, no. Has some phrases in it that are not acceptable. And so that's what we did, but it is a product of the 70s, not something that would or should be shown now. But
that makes sense.
Yes.
I think Duke Paul did a similar funny film that maybe doesn't.
No.
Yeah.
Did a lot of things in the 80s that we thought were hilarious.
Right.
But turns out that times and change, and you never know who you may be hurting by doing something that you think is terribly funny, but could be damaging. So better to let all of that stay in the past. And I want to thank whoever asked about that damn movie. So.
Well, you'll be able to go back and read the comments and know who
I will. I can't wait. I can't wait.
So
there's a lot of peach brandy mentions too. I don't know what's up with that.
That's an old story that goes back to my knight Francois, who, when he was first Prince of Meridies, somebody gave him peach brandy. He got horribly drunk, threw up on his squire, who was ordered to take him back to his lady's tent. And then he was mortified that he would do something so human. And didn't bother me, but he was always haunted by it. And then about 5 or 8 years after it happened, he turned it around and made it about me. He got me probably the best I've ever gotten. It's like, well, this story is really about John and puking on his knight. And there are some folks who still propagate that horrible lie. That's the peach brandy story.
Well, and I've got to say, peach brandy the second time around has got to not be a good smell.
No, it is not. And it's kind of funny because my lady at the time, Cassandra, I was quite the, I like to say clothes horse, but more like a clothes couch. Had a blue satin with frilly fringe and a little cape that went across here. And he heaved on that. And she nearly beat me to death when I got back to the tent. So,
because that's not coming out.
No, that's not coming out. That went back. That went back into the box.
Well, Drake, Duke Drake, he just said something really nice about you. He said, you put in so much service as president that you've probably had more of a hand in shaping the SCA than anyone else, and that's probably true. And I want to thank you for doing a job that most of us would never, ever, ever want to do.
Well, thank you. I will admit that when I put in for the job, it was like to be spokesman and, deal with insurance and stuff. And it turns out that, it kind of gets all over you sometimes. But again, anything I do, it's held up and made easier and done by everybody else who does stuff just as, if not better than, if not better and harder than me. But it's been a privilege to have a chance to do this stuff. I try not to. I've always thought of the SCAs as, if you're going to run something like a crystal bowl, and if you are given this bowl, if you drop it because you're not careful, then you suck. So I've always looked at what I tried to do was not to let go of this opportunity to possibly screw something up. And that drives me more than anything. I don't want to be the one that messes up this wonderful organization.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, that is a lot of pressure.
Sometimes it is, and I won't do this job forever. So, but it's been an honor and a pleasure doing it, and I do love the SCA.
Do you have an assistant? How do you train someone to take over and be president of the SCA?
Well, that's what we're kind of doing now, is something that needed to be done. We're doing that with the Society Seneschal's office, is come up with a training procedures. You have the job description, but the job, like my job description, has changed in the last 3 years. So we're going to starting with like the position like SCA legal, the person who we have to give us advice on some things, not on retainer, but just to give us advice. The Society Seneschal, other jobs, try to get like a training schedule. That's what they do that with the board now. If somebody's coming on the board, they try to get them in 6 months in advance to be able to get a meeting or two so that they know what to expect before they step up.
That makes sense.
We did this with the past Society Seneschal. We brought someone in a year before the Society Seneschal was supposed to step down. The Society Seneschal did recently step down, and Liz took Mike's place, had to step up with only like 2-3 months training. And I know it's driving her batty, but the object is we do need, some type of training procedures, give people time to get used to the job, because doing stuff on this side of the SCA, 95% of the SCA is the game. 95% of the SCA is the members, participants, the events, the kingdoms, the groups, the fun, the learning. And then you've got 5% over here, which is the corporate part. So when you move over and start doing that stuff, it's like, holy crap, I didn't know it was like that. So it's good to give people enough time to know what it is, so that when they do come in, they can kind of start moving their feet.
Yeah, they don't have their minds completely blown.
No, and it is a different set of circumstances. The rewards are, it's just not like doing the SCA. Kingdom Seneschals have the same similar kind of thing, because that's a job I would never do now. It's just a tough ass job.
Yeah.
There are other jobs you handle money, tough ass job. So we're going to try to get more training, try to get things a little more put down on paper, so that folks know what to expect.
I think that's awesome.
So we're almost at the end of the time that we kind of like to go.
Okay.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to talk about?
No, I'm good right now.
So I ask all the Dukes the same 11 questions at the end.
Okay.
And even though you're not fighting anymore, some of them are fighting related, and I'm sure you still have opinions. So I'm going to ask anyway. All right.
Well, I have opinions, yes.
Okay. Shax, you didn't have anything else, did you?
No, I could go on forever, but I'm good. Thank you so much.
Oh, this has been great. I've enjoyed this.
So have we. I mean, you're wonderful. So, okay, if you could fight anyone in the world, who would it be?
At this one time, if I could fight and be at my prime and go into the fight, learning again, I wouldn't mind fighting Tomiki again. He's kind of a wiry weasel kind of guy, and he was always a fun fight when we did get a chance to fight. I'd like to fight Tomiki again. There's 4 or 5 other people across the SCA I would like to do it. But having said that, I know that when I quit fighting, that the art, the skill, the training, all of that has definitely improved. So if I did get a chance, and I was young, and I'd probably have to train for like a year and a half to even have a good chance. I think I'd do okay, but I'd like to fight Tomiki.
He's awesome.
He
And
is
I
awesome.
think your foundation is probably better than you give it credit for.
Well, thank you.
But who would you like to see reign in your kingdom?
In my kingdom, I have my favorite king and queen ever. Who I would like in my kingdom to reign. I don't know. Either way I answer this, it's going to be painful. I guess, and I would like to see Sir Caedmon and his lady on the throne. He's a knight in my group who is one of the greatest guys in the world. I think he would make a great sovereign. I think his lady would make a great queen. Though she really does play in this. Yeah, I'd like to see Caedmon sit on the throne.
Excellent.
With his lady. He'd have to have his lady.
All right. If you could talk about fighting with anyone in the world for an hour, who would it be?
Brannos.
He's a good pick.
He is. His system is similar kind of to the way I fought, though he's much more effective. But I like the way he fights. I like the way he teaches.
He and Ragnvald are both just have such a great understanding of what they're doing. What is your favorite medieval-esque or period movie?
Okay, well, first I'll say that anything about Camelot, I do not like the Camelot legend, so I'm not going to say anything about. I cannot, great legend starts off, the age of chivalry, everything is good, and then the queen runs off, goes to a nunnery. His best friend betrays him. He ends up dying, and a sword ends up in a lake. Now that, while a great thing is, so none of mine are that. I would say I love Ivanhoe from the 50s with Robert Taylor and Elizabeth Taylor. I think that's just such a beautiful movie. And I like the original. Well, I take that back. It's not the original. I like the Errol Flynn Robin Hood. And The Lion in Winter.
Lion in Winter. That's a good one.
Just awesome.
Okay. If you could add or subtract a rule to the rules of the list, what would it be?
Wow. I would perhaps add something about a little more something about behavior on the field and the need for all of us to stress that blow calling is something that needs to be done individually, but that don't screw that responsibility up. I think it not that I'm saying anybody does, but I think I would stress that how important it is to know where you're at, what kingdom you're fighting, and fight as chivalrously as possible. That would probably be it. And I'll probably get in trouble for that too. So.
I think being aware that your calibration is consistent with your culture is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
Yeah. What is your favorite tournament format?
So my wife is watching, so I'm probably going to say something like she got a prince and princess when Glenavon was a principality. She got some good friends of ours to do a principality list that was a wounds retained rotating weapons list. And it turned out to be a horrible list. But because wounds retained, now I'm going to get out of this thing and she's going to kill me. But that is my favorite, baby. I like... I kind of like snowball tournaments. I did good in regular tournaments, but I kind of like the idea of starting off a single combat. Your next fight is with two people, and you build into team fighting. I've always thought it was a great way to train for wars and to get people to be better comrades on the field. So
yeah, it's such a great way to for newer people to meet other people. The warlord snowball tourney thing.
Yep, love it.
What's your favorite event?
Gulf Wars. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, when you're from Glenavon, I expect that's
Yeah,
the answer.
I won't say I'm being pressured to do that, but it's, we get maybe during a good year, get 3,000, 3,500 people. It's big, but it's not huge. And it is a very relaxed, most folks who show up say it is a very relaxed event. And it is. It's a good event. I like it. There are other good events, but Gulf War is pretty cool.
Okay. If you were still fighting and you could have any helmet in the world regardless of cost, what kind would it be?
Oh, good Lord. I would like a bassinet that would fit my head. A good bassinet. I like a good, well-made bassinet with good vision. There's tons of really beautiful helmets out there, but my persona is at heart a Welsh. I am from Wales, and I'm my persona is a brigand, a ne'er-do-well. I swept up in bars, so anything I usually wore, I would explain I took it off of somebody on a battlefield in which I did not participate. So, but I've always had problems with bassinets because of their shape with my head. I just like that particular shape. I like a well-made bassinet. You don't see as many as you used to see.
No.
But no, there's other much more beautiful styles, but they would all fit my head. But I think I'd like to finally achieve bassinet head in a comfortable helmet. That would be good.
Awesome. That's awesome. Okay, it's Saturday morning at Estrella, and several people want to talk to you about last night. What did you do?
Nowadays, it would be I've been up, had my prerequisite Diet Coke. Last night was probably getting to bed about 8 or 9 o'clock. Trying to stay as comfortable as possible in the middle of the friggin' desert at Estrella. 2 or 3 decades ago, it would be a different answer. It would be, did I sleep on the field? That would probably.
Did you make it back to your tent?
Did I make it back to my tent? Did I do anything dumb?
Probably.
Did you wake up next to someone you didn't know?
That was a good story 2 nights ago.
Yeah.
People woke up next to somebody they didn't know. All right, he's going to drink that one away, and we're going to ask the next question. All right, who is your favorite fight ever?
My favorite fight in the entire universe is against Sir Polydor Haraldson from the Mid-Realm when I was but a squire at one of the first or second border raids, in which he was one of my idols, and he was an awesome fighter, and he wore a brig, he wore real armor. I wore like fake fur and tennis shoes and double net pants. And at that one point in a woods fight, I was able to finally kill him. And that he was the most gracious person in the world. But I still remember that particular fight to that day because I had judged everything based on how totally awesome he was as a fighter and as a knight and as a gentleman. And that's just a great fight. I've had multiple really good fights, a lot of memorable fights, but that one still sticks in my head. First time I beat Francois, but I don't bring that up very much. So.
And then the last question is, who is the cleanest fighter in your kingdom?
Oh, God, help us all.
You can pass.
The cleanest fighter in our kingdom. I would say His Majesty Kalen. He is impeccably clean. There are others, I'm sure, who come close, but he is a very clean, wiry fighter, and I've never seen any real questions about him.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This has been a real pleasure. I've really enjoyed your stories, both the serious ones and the fun ones. You're a great storyteller. I might have to check out one of your books.
Okay, thank you. It's like $1.99 on Amazon. It's Blood and Blade. Yay. Thank you.
I wrote down the titles.
Oh.
Right. And thank you everyone for joining us. Next week, we're going to be talking to Duchess Ludwiga Wolfkiller from Ontier, who's been pivotal in shaping Ontier culture. and she's just a kick. So should be another fun one. Thank you so much, Your Grace. We've really
Thank you for
appreciated
having me.
you.
Woo, okay, have a good night and a good
Thank
weekend.
you. All right,
Take
bye-bye.
care.
Bye.